Good evening, everyone. Welcome to TEDx SNK Youth. We are here today to celebrate the power of a single idea, the power to change a perspective, to change a life, and perhaps to change the world. Today, you are going to hear from 12 incredible individuals. They are thinkers, creators, and challengers of the status quo. From the philosophy of free will to the psychology of gossip, from the music that connects us to the silence of 3 a.m., we have a journey ahead of us. So open your minds, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Before we begin with the speakers, I request all of you to turn off your phones or put them on silent mode. Please avoid getting up or walking around while the talk is going on. Moreover, you may click photos or videos, but please take care that the flash is turned off. Let's begin. From the language of music to the language of conversation, our first speaker, Henny Patel, takes a familiar, everyday habit, gossip, and looks at it through a completely new lens. Today, she explores how gossip has evolved across time and what it reveals about us as humans. Please welcome Henny Patel.
Did you hear that? Those whispers? Now let me ask you something. Have you ever heard a rumor about yourself before you even had the chance to live the story? Maya had. Now this is a fictional example, but I promise every single one of you will have a name in mind. Maya. She was confident, prepared, and ready to win a competition until she got a fever the night before. And suddenly, she becomes the hot topic. She wasn't sick. She was scared. She was the typical Maya who panics and drops out. All this over something that wasn't even real. Now here's a statistic to hold. Isn't it crazy how 65% of our daily conversation involve talking about people who aren't even in the room with us? In other words, the version of gossip that most of us recognize. But ever wondered why gossip exists? I mean, we weren't born with it. Clearly, we built it. Let's go back 200,000 years. This is Oren. He didn't have Wi-Fi or iPhones or cousins who would spam Instagram reposts. But to survive, he still needed to know who he could trust, who would help, who would cheat. How do you think he did that? Before language, he used grooming to build trust. But that only works for tiny groups, let's say 50. Then enters language. Do you know this guy? That's anthropologist Robin Dunbar. He was the one who found that humans can maintain about 150 relationships. You see, grooming doesn't scale, talking does. And that's exactly how gossip became our first social technology. It works like a blame game, assigns roles to people that we didn't even ask for. You see, there's a villain, there's a victim, and then there's the informer. And once those labels stick, they start to feel permanent because our brain absorbs drama long before accuracy. Now let's enter into a ballroom. Long before Instagram tea pages, we had her. Familiar? Lady Whistledown, the anonymous columnist who made secrets public and reputations fragile. More power than the queen herself. Not because she was royal, but because she had information. Her pen crowned some, condemned others, and warned the rest. It was the original media outlet before newspapers or the anonymous pages that we pretend we don't check at 2 a.m. And to be honest, she is the proof that society has always had that one person. Every school, every office, every friend group has a Lady Whistledown. Now, if you're sitting here thinking, wait, who is that in my group? I'm not saying it's you. I'm just saying someone in this room is very nervous right now. Now tell me why gossip feels so good. Why do we enjoy it so much? That's because our brain treats it as connection, information, and safety. It's literally a biological wiring. Even more interesting. You hear something about someone from a friend, then it's 3 people talking about it. Soon it's 7. And the next thing you know, your entire grade is talking about it. Except no one actually knows if it's true. That is the illusory truth effect. It basically tells us that when a lie is repeated enough times, your brain automatically starts treating it as a fact. Not because it's accurate, but because it's repeated. So here's what happens. The fake becomes familiar, and the familiar becomes believable. Now comes the fun twist. For a long time, gossip was described as something women did more, right? Almost as if it were a gendered pastime. But when researchers actually came up with gossip behavior, the results were quite straightforward. Let's see. Women tend to share information in more detailed, context-rich narratives, which makes sense, right? Because complete data usually leads to better conclusions, just like a Netflix documentary. Men, on the other hand, they lean toward brief, surface-level updates like a Twitter news alert. Now, since I'm a woman standing here saying this, let me reassure the room. We know exactly where we stand, and we know exactly where you stand, gentlemen. That's not an opinion. That's just consistent observational accuracy. So whether it's a 40-minute emotional arc or a 3-word announcement, it still serves the identical purpose. Tell me honestly, do you really think our future generations will only be managing their health and wealth? Of course not. They're going to be managing their narratives as well. Look around, it's already happening. Companies hire reputation managers, nations run propaganda units, and influencers build entire image teams. We've basically industrialized gossip. So our previous generations witnessed gossip fade, and ours is the one who sees it archive. But let's be fair, we can't just eliminate gossip, right? So if we agree to that, then the next question becomes, how do you make it mindful? How do you not make it worse? Because it usually just starts with someone saying, hey, make sure you don't tell anyone, which is historically the most reliable way to guarantee that everyone will know by the evening. And that's exactly why I created the 2Q test. It's very simple, it's very quick. All you have to do is you take a pause, you think, and you ask yourself, is it true? Hold on. True enough that you would confidently repeat it in front of the person you're talking about. And is it kind? Kind enough that it doesn't harm someone who isn't even in the room to defend themselves. That's how you make gossip mindful, by slowing it down long enough to realize its weight. It's that easy. Now let's flip a coin for a second. What if I say, someone in this room knows something the rest of us don't? I don't have to name them. Your brain probably picked one. But when it comes to us, suddenly it's a thriller and we panic. And you'll be like, no, that's not true. That can't be me. But imagine seeing it differently. How it reveals what people think of you, how they perceive you. And fortunately, perception can be redesigned. So the next time you come across this, you know what you have to do? You take a pause, you think, and you ask yourself, does this define me or expose them? Because here's the irony, it's harmless when it's someone else's, but unbearable when it's ours. So maybe the real fear isn't gossip, it's the version of us living rent free in someone else's mind. But it dissolves. The moment the next story arrives, people forget, the plot changes, the characters rotate, and the dramatic thing you heard on Monday becomes the old news by Wednesday's lunch break. And the funniest part, even this talk, this entire conversation about gossip is gossip about gossip. We're basically standing inside the illusion, describing the illusion while contributing to the illusion. That's the nature of Maya. So if gossip is inevitable and temporary, then the only thing that really stays is how we choose to go beyond this boundary. Because illusions may fade, but integrity doesn't. And that is the one thing that Maya can't touch. Thank you.
From internal moments, we move to external expression. Our next speaker, Sneha Vora, explores the language we use even when we don't speak. Body language, tone, gestures, and everything in between. She shows us how nonverbal communication can reveal more than words ever do. Let's welcome Sneha Vora.
In 1961, when the Assamese only language policy was announced, people felt a ground shift beneath their community. In the Barak Valley, Bengali was the majority language, and suddenly, schools were asked to remove all Bengali textbooks. Elders whispered that their children's future had been rewritten without their consent. And so, peaceful rallies formed at the Silchar railway station, hopeful that the government would listen. Instead, gunshots shattered the crowd, killing 11 unarmed protesters. That night, when a man returned from the protest, shaking, murmuring, they killed people for wanting to read in their own language. Even decades later, he still visits the memorial because he knows what was at stake. Not just a language, but the dignity and right of a community to exist without fear. This isn't just a distant problem or a scene from history books. Across our world, language has been used to draw lines in the sand. The Uyghurs in China, the Kurds in Turkey. These communities have faced oppression for merely speaking in their mother tongue. Catalan speakers have been fined, threatened, and denied service for speaking in their language. A professor was fined £601 at passport control for speaking Catalan. In Peru, Quechua-speaking families decided not to teach the language because in Spanish-dominated areas it meant exclusion and mockery. These stories remind us that language can grant us belonging, but just as quickly carve barriers that fuel isolation and conflict. But let's pause for a moment. Is language the only way we can truly connect as humans? What if we looked beyond words and discovered more fundamental forms of understanding? Long before alphabets and textbooks, humanity spoke in a different way, through images and expressions that needed no dictionaries. The power of visual and emotional communication is much more impactful than what you can imagine. Picture yourself lost in a country where you don't speak their language. Fear, frustration, and helplessness is definitely what you're going to feel. This actually happened to me. I got lost in a small town in Italy and I had no idea how I was going to find my parents. All the announcements were in a different language and I didn't speak Italian. The 9-year-old me was petrified, to say the least. Just then, an elderly man noticed me sitting alone. He walked over and said something in Italian, but soon realized that I didn't speak the language. So he just offered me a cookie. His eyes were kind and his smile was gentle, and I think that expression is what made the 9-year-old me know that I didn't have to worry about stranger danger. He just patted my shoulder reassuringly, and just like that, I didn't have to know Italian to know that I was safe. A child crying, two people reuniting, or just a look of empathy speaks to everyone, everywhere, often much more clearly than words. Travel back thousands of years to ancient Egypt, where hieroglyphics were commonly used pictorial symbols adorned on temple walls. These images weren't just pretty art. They were stories, laws, and prayers, accessible and understood by everyone. Fast forward to today's emojis, and you'll realize that our need for visual communication hasn't changed a bit. Isn't it fascinating how a simple heart or a smiley emoji can break through all language barriers and communicate instantly and universally? In Bihar, India, many women for generations were denied access to reading and writing. But did that stop them from communicating their pains, their lives, and their hopes? No. Through Madhubani art, which originated in the 14th century, these women filled their homes and villages with brilliant color and mesmerizing patterns. Their art wasn't just decoration. It was protest, celebration, and communication all rolled into one, allowing their voices to echo across cultures and centuries. And this need for visual communication is mirrored across cultures. In Africa, the tribes communicate via beadwork, masks, and often ceremonial scars and tattoos, all representing their relationships, status, and stories. In the Americas, the tribes devised a sign language to connect and cooperate without a spoken language. Isn't it remarkable how, when the will to connect is strong, humans always find a way? But what about the language we carry with us every day? Our faces. Charles Darwin, the famous naturalist, didn't just write about evolution. He studied how we express emotions, and he discovered that a smile, a frown, or a look of surprise means the same thing whether in Paris, Delhi, or the most remote Pacific island. He explained this in his book, The Expression of Emotions in Man and Animals, where he showed that facial expressions are built-in codes, shared, instinctive, and impossible to fake across cultures. Darwin explains that not just humans, but our entire ecosystem, including animals, understand each other because of facial cues and visual expressions. And we see this universal understanding in great global moments too. I think it's incredible how art, music, or just a simple gesture can connect people when nothing else seems to work. So, what does that really mean for us? Maybe we've become so dependent on spoken language that we forget the deeper ways we're all truly connected. What if we chose to focus on the art, the faces, the symbols, the expressions that every human understands? Just imagine the amount of misunderstandings that would soften if we stopped for a moment and chose to listen with our hearts and eyes just as much as our ears. Every painting, every ancient symbol, every expression someone makes, they're not just messages, they're invitations, they're bridges, they're ways of saying, I'm human, just like you. And wouldn't the world feel so much richer if we chose to look at the things that unite us rather than fearing and worrying about what sets us apart? Maybe moving beyond boundaries isn't about abandoning language at all. It's about remembering that language is only a small piece of a much bigger, much beautiful picture. If we are willing to truly look, truly listen, and truly feel, we'll realize that unity is right there, waiting for us, beyond words, beyond fear, and beyond every boundary we've created. Thank you.
We communicate to achieve, but how do we actually succeed? Our next speaker, Utsav Finava, challenges a common belief that talent is everything. His talk breaks down why hard work and discipline often matter far more than natural ability. Please welcome Utsav Finava.
I remember watching this guitarist online. Absolute wizard. Fingers flying, emotion pouring out of every note. And then I tried to play the same song. It basically sounded like my guitar was protesting. But that's when I started wondering, is this person truly gifted, or did they just practice differently? Are some people just born talented, or do they just refuse to stop giving up? Because if it's genetic, I'm calling my parents and asking for a refund. So maybe the boundary isn't between the talented and the untalented. Maybe the boundary is between those who stop at I can't and those who continue with I'll try. People often talk about talent like it's this magical thing, like some people just pop out of the womb playing Beethoven while the rest of us are still struggling with Happy Birthday. But science paints a very different picture. Back in the 1970s, neuroscientist Eric Kandel was experimenting with a sea slug called Aplysia. He found that whenever it learned something simple, like withdrawing its gill when touched, the neurons in its brain formed new connections. And with repetition, these connections became stronger and faster. Kandel later won the Nobel Prize in 2000 for proving that learning physically reshapes the brain, even in humans. Every skill we learn, whether it's hitting a note, solving an equation, or even public speaking, leaves a little biological footprint in our neurons. What's even more amazing is how our brain adapts to practice. Every time we repeat a skill, the neurons wrap those circuits in a substance called myelin. Basically, electrical insulation for our brain. The more we practice, the thicker the myelin, and the faster the signal travels. Think of it like the brain's version of upgrading from a slow, glitchy Wi-Fi to a high-speed fiber internet. But not all practice is equal. Psychologist Anders Ericsson, who inspired the famous 10,000-hour rule, found that what really matters is deliberate practice, the kind that feels uncomfortable. Deliberate practice is practice with focus, with feedback, and with discomfort. You aim for the edge of your ability, you fail there, and you stay there over and over again. So every time you struggle, you're literally rewiring your brain to handle more. So yes, every time I botched that same guitar chord over and over again, technically, I was getting smarter. Emotionally, debatable. But then, this flips the whole born with it idea on its head. Because if practice reshapes our brain, then the boundary isn't biological, it's psychological. It's not about who's gifted, it's about who keeps showing up long enough for their brain to catch up. But then, here's the problem. Even after knowing the science, that skill is built, not born, most of us never try. Why? Because of something I call the talent trap. It's that moment when you see someone do something incredible and think, wow, must be nice to be born like that. And just like that, you have exited the race before you even stepped on the track. let's do one thing. Quick show of hands. How many of you ever thought, I wish I could do that? All right, and how many of you have actually tried? See, that gap between wishing and trying, that's where the myth of talent lives. Psychologist Carol Dweck calls this having a fixed mindset. The belief that ability is something you either have or you don't. And when you believe that, effort becomes a threat. Because every time you try and you fail, it just becomes proof that you are just not cut out for it. But then there are people with a growth mindset who see effort as an engine for improvement. They don't think talent is a label, they think it's a direction. And then there's Albert Bandura, who studied something called self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to improve. Bandura found that your belief in your ability predicts real performance better than your current ability itself, which means it's not talent that gets you started, it's believing that improving is worth it. This goes for me as well. When I first started, I would watch people my age play effortlessly and think, I could never do that. But I wasn't limited by my hands or my ears. I was limited by this one quiet phrase I kept repeating. I could never do that. That's the talent trap. It convinces us that skill is fate, not effort. It keeps us as spectators instead of participants. But if science says talent is built, and psychology says belief shapes effort, then the real difference between the talented and the untalented isn't potential, it's persistence. We talk about persistence and hard work like it's poetic. In reality, it's messy, frustrating, and sometimes downright painful. When I first started, every time I tried to play a bar chord, it basically sounded like I was trying to strangle the guitar. I genuinely thought my fingers were made out of rubber. But then something clicked. Every time I pushed through that discomfort, something was changing, not just in my hands, but in my brain. As mentioned earlier, neuroscience shows that deliberate practice rewires neural pathways. Psychologist Angela Duckworth calls this combination grit, sticking with something long enough until mastery. Her research shows that grit predicts long-term success better than talent or IQ. And the best part, grit isn't inspirational, it's trainable. Neuroscientist Robert York adds that growth happens in the desirable difficulty zone. That space where you're not failing catastrophically, but you are definitely not comfortable. Just far enough outside abilities that your brain says, okay, we need to rewire for this. And Erickson's idea of deliberate practice fits into this perfectly. Target the weak spot, get feedback, repeat. And here's the cool part. Your brain rewards effort itself. Because every time you struggle and improve, even a tiny bit, dopamine fires. Not for success, but for the attempt. And over time, your brain learns effort is equal to reward. And this goes for me as well. My goal stopped being the perfect chord. It became the small wins. One cleaner sound, one transition that didn't squeak. Those tiny victories trained me to stay with discomfort instead of avoiding it. All right, now let's zoom out. What happens when you push past that initial struggle? You find something far more powerful than talent itself, persistence. Think of athletes who have trained for years before their first win, or scientists who have failed sometimes hundreds or thousands of experiments before a breakthrough. Turns out, overnight success usually takes about 10 years, give or take a few mental breakdowns. But when you look closer, every so-called gifted person has one thing in common. They kept going when no one was watching. So maybe talented people aren't blessed, they're just better at being bad for longer. I think I've been going on for way too long. Now, let's take a moment. Think of something you have always admired in others, whether it's painting, coding, public speaking, or even playing an instrument for that matter. And ask yourself honestly, did you ever give yourself the chance to be bad at it long enough to get good? Going beyond the boundary of talent isn't just about having more ability. It's giving yourself the permission to persist, stumble, and improve when no one is watching. Persistence doesn't just build skill, it reshapes how we see ourselves, transforms boundaries, and transforms I can't into I'll try. Remember that guitarist we saw earlier? So maybe talent isn't a finish line we chase, but the side effect of falling in love with the process. The hours, the mistakes, the awkward attempts. If talent creates boundaries, effort erases them. Because every time you try, fail, and try again, your brain rewires. Every stumble or squeaky chord becomes progress. So the next time you see someone do something incredible, don't think, I could never. Think, I could start. Because that's where every so called talent truly begins. And if the journey begins with a few terrible sounds, that's just a universe tuning you in. Thank you.
Next up, we have a question that has puzzled humanity for centuries. Up next is Ayushi Kansagra, who explores one of the oldest debates in philosophy, fate versus free will. She questions whether our choices are truly ours or shaped by forces we don't fully see. Let's welcome Ayushi Kansagra.
Do you believe in fate? God's plan? Kismet? Or maybe you're more so the master of my fate, captain of my soul type. You know, it dates back centuries, this clash of ideologies, otherwise known as free will versus fate. Two sides, one question. Who wins? The answer must lie in the evidence, right? So let's take a look, and then you can decide for yourself which one makes more sense. Side 1 is the believers. Side 2, the non-believers. Side 1 is backed by quantum physics. Pretty strong to start with. I don't know what can beat that, if anything. Side 2, show us what you got. Quantum physics. It's quantum physics. You can't expect it to make sense. But I'll try my best to explain. Imagine the sky during Uttarayan. A bunch of kites flying high up in the sky, moving in all kinds of different directions. You're probably looking at something like this. Now, let's take one of these kites and simulate what seem to be its sudden, unpredictable movements. Okay, I think you get the point. Looking at it, the kite's position, I think you'd agree, was random. But while flying a kite, you fail to consider that you're the one holding the spool. You control the string, you guide the kite, and you dictate its direction. It's not so different with particles. See, each one of them moves along a precise path, guided by an invisible wave. So the kite becomes a particle, and you, an invisible wave. Einstein agrees with us. What this tells us is that particles have definite positions and trajectories. Everything is already decided. Say, it's interesting, you know, honestly. Everything is already set in motion. Think of those toy cars we used to have, the ones where you pull back and let go so they move forward. Well, this pullback, it happened long before you or I ever existed. We're simply seeing it unfold. Every mail you'll have, every grade you'll receive, every call with your family that lives far away, every inside joke with your friends, every high, every low, it's pre-written. You can't cheat it. There is no escape. All roads lead to Rome. Now, I don't know about you, but I have mixed feelings about this whole determinism ordeal. What do you mean I lost that one chance to win a gold just because it wasn't meant to be? Who are you to tell me that? Why do anything at all then? It's going to happen either way. That assignment you've been putting off, if it's meant to happen, it will, anyhow. Why am I speaking? Why are you listening? Why am I here? Why are you? Just because our guiding waves brought us here? That's ridiculous. Come on. The day you are going to die is fixed. Could be 50 years from now, or maybe 10. Maybe even tomorrow. and there's nothing you can do about it. But what if there is? Maybe some of you have heard this before. Yeah, that's the first sound you hear opening Clash Royale, Supercell's absolute hit game. In Clash, whenever you win, you get a chest. It looks like this. What I want you to see here are these 4 question marks at the bottom. They're there because the chest spins 4 times. And at that point, what's inside could be anything. Could be gold coins, could be gems, cards, or champion cards. That's the one you really want. But you don't actually know what you're going to get until you tap that screen for a 4th time. Only then does it go from all possibilities to just one, your final reward. Turns out, quantum physics is pretty much the same as Clash. See, at a microscopic level, particles don't have definite properties. They exist in a cloud of all possible states, all together, a superposition, and when observed, collapse into one. Now, remember I told you about galaxies? Well, the thing about galaxies is that they're huge, so they don't behave the same way as these particles. But this example itself was pretty oversimplified, so here's what we're gonna do. Maybe some of you haven't had the pleasure of experiencing ultimate rage bait in the form of cartoons, fighting and screaming. Now I'll play an audio and you'll listen to it, okay? This is how particles seem without observation.
Bread.
Need a replay?
Bread.
Okay, I know you think you're hearing something and that's maybe bread or brown, but trust me, it's not. Here's what we're gonna do. We'll say the magic word. Observe. Look at how the audio changes.
Blue.
Was that blue? Let's go again.
Red.
Red. And again.
Blue.
Blue.
Red.
Red.
Blue.
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 Blue. Catching on? The first audio was both these words, red and blue, being said simultaneously. But when we observed, it collapsed. It picked the outcome. What this tells us is that the observers, that's us, become part of the unfolding. Now, let's say you decided to wear black socks tonight, okay? This is probably what went on in your head. See that box? That's your thought. And currently, it's in the cloud of all possibilities. Either you wear black socks or you wear white socks. This guy, name's Ron, Neuron, and he's working hard to package your thought. And so this package goes on and on along the assembly line until right at the very end, when the cloud collapses. That's when you get your thought. That's when you decide to wear black socks. This is libertarianism. Now, we're back to square one, because either everything's controlled or nothing is. This process itself is random. So I think I must confess now, I've kept something from you. A secret third option, compatibility. Much like it sounds, compatibility is about both these ideas being true together, to some extent. It states that even if the universe is fully determined, you're still free, as long as your actions come from your own desires, your own reasoning, and your own intentions. No external coercion. Destination is fixed. Journey depends on your free will. This kind of hits home because most of us here, myself included, are soon going to a very new phase in our lives, college, the real world. And it's comforting to think that maybe, just maybe, with all the choices we make, and with all the ones that we don't, we end up right where we belong. You're here because you belong here, in this moment, here now. Believing or not believing in free will becomes the framework of your perspective of responsibility. Whether you should or not, that's your decision. Well, the your part is debatable. Thank you.
Up next is Jia Parsana, who challenges a belief deeply rooted in society, the idea that sacrifice is always noble. She questions how much we glorify giving things up and at what cost. Please welcome Jia Parsana.
We've all heard how mothers often shrink their biggest dreams, those ambitions they once chased with fire, only to nurture their family's growth, pouring everything into lives that aren't even their own. And dads, they hold back tears and tough emotions to play the strong provider, delaying the care that could heal them, all so that the family stays steady. And then there are students like us who leave behind joy, dreams, and childhood to achieve standards that we did not even set. To us, these aren't choices. They are sacrifices that hit hard. But if all of this is sacrifice, what do we really mean by sacrifice? So when I researched this online, I realized that by definition, sacrifice is giving up something valuable, like time, energy, opportunities, or even parts of yourself for the sake of someone or something else. By that definition, even giving the last chocolate I'm emotionally attached to my friend should count as sacrifice, right? Like, yes, take it, my friend. Take the chocolate that carried my hopes, dreams, and will to live. But here's the truth that we rarely say out loud. Most of what we call sacrifice isn't sacrifice at all. It's compromise, deep internal compromise that is conditioned into us by the societies that depend on our silence. So when I was preparing for this talk, I was absolutely convinced that everything that people gave up was a sacrifice. Every late night, every plan cancelled, every emotion swallowed, sacrifice. I honestly thought people were walking monuments of selflessness. But then one day, my teacher looks at me and asks, is everything that you give up truly sacrifice? Every small thing you do, does that count as sacrifice? And I froze. Because she was right. If sacrifice means giving up something important, don't we do that every single day? Our time is important, our energy is important, our peace is important, our sanity is important. And by that logic, even giving the last slice of pizza should be counted as sacrifice. Because I've honestly grieved pizza harder than some life decisions. But that one question cracked something open. And I started realizing, what if most of what we sacrifice isn't sacrifice at all, but rather compromise? And here's the plot twist. We call it sacrifice because it makes the compromise feel noble. It gives us a socially approved badge for the things that we never truly wanted to give up. It makes the pain feel meaningful, the exhaustion feel justified, and the loss feel honored. But here's the real difference. Sacrifice is a choice. It comes from love, abundance, and intention. And people walk out feeling happy, fulfilled, and connected. But compromise? Compromise is conditioning. And it is based on fear. Fear of disappointing, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as selfish. And it leaves people feeling small, drained, and invisible. But because compromise sounds like losing and all of us want to be those virtual heroes, we prefer sacrifice. We prefer the prettier word to mask the harder truth. And when I look back at my own life, I realize how true this is. All of us make compromises that are stitched together by guilt, expectation, and silence. But where is it that we learned to compromise? How is it that our societies realize that, okay, we should be the ones compromising? Let's zoom out. Across psychology, anthropology, and sociology, there's one idea that consistently shows up. Societies teach people to sacrifice because that's what group survival depended on. Conformation and predictability, on them being cooperated. For thousands of years, we humans have rewarded behaviors that protected a group, like sharing food and resources and maintaining harmony, discouraging actions that threaten this unity. Anthropologists call this socialization, the process by which communities and institutions teach people to behave so that a society stays stable. In evolutionary psychology, this aligns with something called costly signaling theory, which basically means that when you give up something valuable, people read it as a sign that you are loyal and safe to rely on. So, over time, we learned to glorify this act because it kept groups coordinated and predictable. But then, something else happened. As our economies developed, institutions amplified this expectation. Industrialization needed obedient workers. Patriarchy needed compliant caregivers. Schools needed students who wouldn't question outdated metrics, and families needed children who would fulfill roles without protest. So compromise, internal, painful, and personal, became normalized. And sacrifice, it became the PR campaign that made it look noble. And here's the part that stings. We sacrifice not because we're weak, but because the system is brilliantly designed. Sacrifice is wrapped up as morality. People risk being seen as selfish if they do not sacrifice. Sacrifice gives temporary validation. Every good job, every thank you, every you're so reliable trains our brain to keep repeating this behavior. Sacrifice is gendered. Girls are taught to please, boys are taught to be strong, and both learn to compromise. Sacrifice creates our identity. When people realize that their worth is measured by how much they lose, they realize that they can only be measured by what they lose. And sacrifice is normalized way too early. From classrooms to families, the message is be good, be obedient, listen, don't question. Just manage and adjust. This is not sacrifice. This is conditioning. And this conditioning, it doesn't stay inside us. It spills out. Mothers lose economic independence and with it long-term economic security. Fathers carry emotional burdens that turn into stress disorders and chronic illnesses. Students lose creativity and identity that leads to burnout before adulthood. Entire communities stop innovating because people realize dreaming is so difficult. And research from Stanford backs this. It shows that when sacrifices are made out of guilt and obligation, it leads to lower satisfaction and higher emotional distancing. So the issue is not sacrifice itself. It's what drives it. But here's the hopeful part. Change does not need a revolution. It needs awareness. And we can allow that change to happen. First, pause and ask yourself, is this coming from love or from fear? Because we're allowed to choose ourselves. We're allowed to set our limits. We're allowed to rest without apologizing. Or as I like to call it, it's all about not turning into that friend who's basically customer service for everybody else's chaos. Like, hi, you've reached the helpline. Press 1 for drama, press 2 for overthinking, and press 3 if it's the same problem again. We all know that is true. I want to tell you something straight from my heart. All of us here today deserve a world that is not built on sacrifice, a life in which our dreams are not optional, a world where compassion includes us. And maybe, just maybe, the next generation can grow up in a society that values people not for how much they give up, but for how fully they live their lives. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Vardhaman, explores a powerful idea, the 3 a.m. moment. Those hours when everything feels clearer, deeper, and more honest. He talks about what these moments reveal about us. Let's welcome Vardhaman Sanghvi.
All right, all right, all right. So that was all the Matthew McConaughey I could muster up. But quick show of hands, who here has had that I am Thanos snapping my life away existential crisis at 3 a.m.? I know I have had. Yeah, see, these are my people. The rest of you are either lying or sleeping too much. So here's my theory. My theory is that 3 a.m. isn't even a time anymore. It's more like a cosmic roast session. It's the hour where your brain goes, hey, you're free? Cool. Let's question your entire existence in 480p using Microsoft Paint and Comic Sans. And of course, as the great Ted Mosby once said, nothing good happens after 2 a.m., which is hilarious because I'm always there at 3:17 a.m. deciding my entire future while eating cold pizza and Googling, am I failing or just dramatic? You know the feeling, right? Your body wants rest, your brain wants answers, and your fridge just wants to know why are you standing in front of it again, scrolling through your regrets like they're itemized on an Excel sheet. So one night I hit the peak episode myself. I was sitting on my bedroom floor literally, surrounded by papers, past papers, rough work, notes, everything. It was like my academic career had exploded and landed around me. And in that moment, I remember thinking to myself, maybe I'm not built for this. Maybe everyone else is just built tougher. You know the feeling, right? Like everyone else is built out of titanium and you are built out of expired Play-Doh. So, and in that moment, I genuinely believed this is where I break. But what I thought was my breaking point was actually the point where I upgraded. So here's the plot twist I wish someone would have told me before I cried onto my history notes. It is that when you feel that you're emotionally hitting a wall, your brain isn't actually shutting down. It is doing renovation. Several studies have shown that stress doesn't mess you up. Rather, it restructures and reconfigures your brain, especially the hippocampus. Sorry, wrong hippocampus. This hippocampus. This is the part of your brain which controls your memory, identity, and learning. And under repeated pressure, let's say 4 assessments due in 72 hours, your brain becomes more capable of rewiring. It becomes more plastic. It starts forming new connections 10 times faster than your normal, calm, Instagram scrolling state. Now let's combine that with something else. At 3 a.m., your distractions are finally quiet. Your friends are asleep, your phone is boring, Instagram has run out of new reels. And in that moment, your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical part of your brain, is half asleep. And your amygdala, which is the emotional alarm system, it is like, stop meeting right now. It is basically like your brain fired the supervisor and hired the intern. So you feel raw, exposed, emotional, and very, very dramatic. But that is not a sign that you're broken. It is a sign that your filters are finally off. And that version of you, that uncomfortable, overthinking, slightly unhinged version of you, that's the honest you. But if this moment is so powerful, why do we run from it? Why do we open our phones, open YouTube, watch a 47-minute video called 10 Ways to be Productive at 3:21 a.m. and end up doing none of those? It's not because we are weak. Harvard psychologist Timothy Wilson conducted a study where he put people in alone in a room, with no phones, no distractions, no music, nothing, just with themselves for 6 to 15 minutes. And optionally, they were given a small electric shock that they could give themselves to escape that time alone. Now, most of the people had already tried that shock. And they said that they would avoid being shocked at all costs. They would literally pay money to prevent themselves from being shocked. But guess what happened? Most of the people chose the shock anyways. 67% of men and 25% of women chose actual physical shock or being alone with their thoughts. Come on, men, we are also losing the introspection battle. So the next time it's 3 a.m. and you want to press that metaphorical zap me instead button, congratulations, you are scientifically normal. But why? Why do we not want to be alone with ourselves? It's because introspection is dangerous. It threatens our identity. It forces us to confront the gap between who we are and who we want to be, the dreams we buried because it's too unrealistic, the relationship we know is wrong but we won't leave. The 3 a.m. moment isn't scary because it is dark. It is scary because it is honest. And honesty is heavy when you have been carrying lies about yourselves for years. So now the question isn't how do I avoid the 3 a.m. moment? The question now is what do I do when I get there? There is a 3-step 3 a.m. toolkit the next time that you could use your brain hosts the Shame Olympics. The first step is to label the fear. UCLA researcher Matthew Lieberman conducted a study where he ran brain scans of people looking at emotional images. And when the people labeled their feelings, just put their emotions into words, their activity in the amygdala went down and their prefrontal cortex came back online. In normal people language, it is as if saying, I feel anxious, is turning the emotional volume knob slightly down so that your logical part of your brain can finally speak up. So the next time, instead of lying there in the vague fog of everything is terrible, say or even whisper, I feel scared I am going to fail. I feel like I am falling behind. I feel anxious. I feel fear. It sounds tiny, it sounds small. But a feeling with no name is a monster, and a feeling with a name is a problem. And problems, we can work with those. The second step is to ask the identity question. Most of us ask the worst possible question at 3 a.m., which is, how do I fix this mess? Which is completely wrong. Instead, try asking, who do I have to become to overcome this mess? So when you ask the who part of the question instead of the how, your brain stops obsessing over the catastrophe and starts building a new version, a new character. So the 3 a.m. moment does not become the end of your story, it becomes your origin story. The third and the final step is to extract one line of insight. Every 3 a.m. moment contains a signal. If you run from it, you just feel tired the next day. But if you stay for a minute longer, you could extract something from it. So before you go to sleep, write one line, not a novel, that tonight I realized I'm outgrowing dash. Tonight I realized that I feel dash. Tonight I realized that I need to do dash. That's it. Close the notebook, go to sleep. These one-liners, they are like seeds. One night they mean nothing, but over the weeks they start to form a pattern. And that pattern is a new version of yourself taking shape. So back to that night on the floor. Same room, same exam, same chaos, same cold pizza. Old me would have thought that that's the place where everything ended. But now looking back at it, that was the first time I stopped performing for the world and actually listened to myself. I named the fear, I asked the identity question, I wrote one brutally honest line. And nothing changed overnight, but something shifted. Because 3 a.m. was no longer the place I went to fall apart, it became the place I go to tell myself the truth. So the next time it's 3 a.m., remember, you're not weak for breaking at 3 a.m., you're just finally honest. And that moment, that uncomfortable, overthinking, sleep-deprived, fridge-staring moment is not where your story collapses. It's where your story upgrades. It's not where you fall apart. It's where you finally hear yourself. And that is exactly where transformation begins. Thank you.
Now we shift from social structures to emotional connection. Our next speaker, Freya, takes us into the world of sound, exploring how music connects people across cultures, emotions, and experiences. She reminds us why music truly is a universal language. Please welcome Freya Judia.
I hope you are wondering why in the world I began with a sound like that. The infamous sound of Indian traffic. Not to say that it's the only place in the world to have such a hectic sound, but it definitely is the first place I've heard something truly as, what should I call it, special. When I came to India, my family did tell me a lot of things, like how I would see cows casually crossing roads. However, they conveniently forgot to mention that getting a wink of sleep after a 12-hour flight would be impossible. But the thing is, no matter what, the horns serve their purpose effectively. They communicate the fact that someone is in your way, and ideally, they should get out. And as absurd as this may sound, I would like to call this cacophony music. Simply because even though it does sound bad, it is a way of expressing emotions, and one of the languages of emotions is music. Like chemistry has formulae and equations, and math has numbers and symbols. So if I were to ask you if you have ever wondered what it would be like to communicate using sounds, your answer shouldn't just be a yes. It should be that I already do use them every single day. Now picture this: taking a break from the city, going to a peaceful countryside, different country. Sounds amazing, right? But then you realize you have to dig into the depths of your brain to find the few elementary words that you understand in the language spoken over there. Yes, you could always take out your phone and translate, but do you really want to spend a holiday doing that? This is where I'd like to show you Exhibit A. That was La Campanella, an Italian piece, which translates to the little bell in English. Now, I don't know how many of you know Italian, but I definitely don't, and I'm still sure we all could understand that this piece was not trying to say something sad. You're right. This piece in particular focuses on emotions of wonder and astonishment. If we were to get into the technicalities, this is done through the jump in high notes and the quick bowing pattern. All of this combined makes this piece resemble the sound of a bell, where the name comes from. However, getting back to the main point, even without knowing a lot about Italy, you could still understand the message being passed to you. And with further listening, you'd probably end up feeling like you've heard a whole story with the climax and everything. I have another example, one of my personal favorites, Exhibit B. was Habanera by Georges Bizet from the opera Carmen. The version you heard was the violin one, in short, the version without French lyrics. This piece is very passionate, dramatic, has ups and downs, and once again, if we were to get into the technicalities, this is done through the switch in the major and minor scales. Initially, there's a minor scale, and as the piece progresses, there's a continuous switch between the two. Major scales associate with more brighter and happier sounds, whereas minor scales are the exact opposite. They resonate with serious and more deeper tones. But what I want you to gather from all of this is that if you could comprehend so much from a piece without words, then regardless of whether they were present or not, you would still be able to understand the message being passed to you. The linguistic barriers that we had when we came to the country, they're broken and filled with simple appreciation and understanding of the country you're in. That's the thing about music. I just showed you 2 examples in relation to countries, but this can also happen with emotions. We do our best to describe music under certain words. For example, I could say 5 pieces are happy and another 10 are serious. But the truth is, music has so many dimensions that words just don't do justice all the time. The only thing that can describe such pieces of music is what you feel when you hear them. This in no way, however, should mean that I'm advocating for 0 words. I mean, there are so many songs filled with wonderful, diverse, and meaningful lyrics that we all love. In fact, there's music in the way we speak, and I'm pretty sure we use words to talk, right? I mean, we don't talk like this, in a boring, unexpressive, flat tone. We have those highs and lows to say we're happy, to say we're gloomy. And this change in pitch, which is music, is also how we associate some emotions with sounds. Even if I didn't know what someone was going on about in Hindi, I would still be able to understand whether or not I'm supposed to be happy. Like, do you know when you're talking to somebody, and even after asking them to repeat, like 3 to 4 times, you didn't quite catch what they said? So you end up smiling and nodding because you did hear a slight rise in their pitch towards the end, so you know you're supposed to be happy for them, even if you don't know why. The wonderful thing about this example is that we've all done it, regardless of nationality or age. I mean, you cannot look at me and say you haven't done it. I can see those guilty faces. This is where I'd like to say music is associative. It's up to you and only you what you want to associate it with. Maybe a particular experience, emotion, person, place. You don't have to be some classical expert to do that. You just have to feel. Now, another example I have, which really contradicts the serious tone I've got going on over here, is Exhibit C. Seeing a couple of smiles, I presume some of you know what this sound is. But for those of you who don't, first of all, thank you so much for not being victims of social media's irresistible pull. But here's some context for you. This sound is typically background music for memes that make disastrous situations into more relatable ones for us. Most of the time, however, because the one I'm about to show you isn't directly disastrous. It's more, well, you'll see what I mean. Like I said, not directly disastrous, but the idea, definitely. I mean, realizing I have to go to school for 4 more days, I have mixed feelings about that. Anyways, I talked about music forming connections and making communication easier, but what about people who are deaf? But being deaf does not mean you cannot feel music. Specifically, you can feel its vibrations much better, actually. In fact, in an article from the University of Washington, it was mentioned that in a research study, deaf students showed activity in the auditory cortex, a part of our brain which is responsible for receiving and making sense of sounds, which in people with normal hearing is only active when there is auditory stimulation. This is because the auditory cortex in people who are deaf has rewired itself to receive signals from other senses like touch and sight. And as a result, many deaf concertgoers hold rubber balloons in their hands so that they can feel the vibrations of music through that thin rubber. They focus more on the path of music and they feel it with their whole bodies. No matter your age, your ability, or your nationality, music remains universally understandable and provides a way to give messages when words aren't the best option. So the next time you hear a different sound, a piece of music from a different country maybe, it's a way of communicating and forming an understanding. After all, music is a universal language. Thank you.
Our next speaker invites us to look inward, toward the barriers we don't see, yet feel every day. Devashi's talk explores the final boundary, the psychological limits we place on ourselves. Please welcome Devashri Shah.
In 1974, Philippe Petit walked a tightrope between the World Trade Center towers, 400 meters above the ground. A single wire, no safety harness, one wrong step, death. But Philippe, he wasn't afraid. On that wire, he laughed, he knelt down. You see, fear is not the problem. We've explored every continent. We've mapped the human genome. We've even walked on the moon. But the most mysterious territory in existence is right here. The 14-centimeter wide space right between our ears. We have mastered the external world, but what about the internal one? We've barely even begun to scratch its surface. Did you feel that? That tiny moment of fear. Your heart started racing, your body tensed. Why? Neither the bottle nor the water in it were a real threat to you. So what happened? Your brain, it didn't wait to check. It reacted almost instantly, and that's how powerful your mind is. Imagine there are two boxes. One is labeled as real fear, and the other one, imagined fear. Neuroscience tells us that the brain's amygdala, it does not just react to real fear. It flares up even to imagined ones. And imagined fear, that's just fear wearing a mask. You are being held hostage under threats that don't even exist. You see, fear is not the problem. The problem is that we keep putting everyday challenges into the wrong box. Real fear is when a street dog starts chasing you and your legs, they activate like you're qualifying for Paris Olympics. And imagine fear. Imagine fear is when someone texts, "We need to talk." And suddenly, you're mentally preparing yourself for an apology speech and last words. You see, one fear chases you, and the other fear, you chase yourself. Neuroscience tells us that our brain can't always tell the difference between a real threat and an imagined threat.
That's why your heart races before an exam.
That's why your heart races before an exam. That's why your hands shake before you raise them in the class. That is why you rehearse every single conversation. Not because you're afraid, but because your brain is working way too hard to protect you. Now, the question is, can we be fearless? Absolutely not. We cannot be fearless, but we can always train our brain to fear less. And the fastest way to do this is by moving things into the right box. Our everyday fears like failures, judgment, reaction, they belong in the imagined fear box. But our brain, it throws them into the real fear box. This misplacement here is the entire problem. Our brain learns fear automatically, but it unlearns fear intentionally. Psychologists call this reappraisal, changing the way you interpret things. And when you do this, something extraordinary happens right here. The amygdala, it quiets down. The prefrontal cortex, which is the logical part, it takes over, and the threat begins to shrink. This is not a motivational talk. This is how your brain rewires itself. And when you do this, you beat every single fear. Imagine this. You're in a situation where you're absolutely scared, like taking a step towards your goals. When you do that, your brain rewires itself. It forms new connection, it updates its understanding of the world, it learns. I can do this. I did not break, and I am capable. Fear does not get weaker, you get stronger. Let me explain this in more depth with the help of a phenomena, the amygdala hijack. The amygdala hijack occurs when the emotional part of your brain, which is the amygdala, takes over so fast that the logical part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, it doesn't even get a chance to speak. Now, this made sense when we used to run away from tigers. But today, it gets triggered by the simplest things like an examination, stage fright, or even a single hateful comment. Your heart races, your palms sweat, your thoughts freeze. Not because the situation is actually life-threatening, but because your brain treats it like one. And in that moment, you're not responding to reality. You're responding to a memory, a fear, or a trigger. That split-second takeover is the amygdala hijack. How to beat amygdala hijack? The first step is to train your body. When you're under a stressful situation, your body, it tends to act like you're in a wildlife documentary. And trust me, your body loves overreacting. Once, I was about to speak in the class, and my heart started sprinting like it had a separate life insurance policy, and my hands shaking like a Nokia phone on silent. And all this just because the teacher said, "Can you read the next line?" My brain literally went, "We are not safe, abort mission." But you know what I did next? I took one deep breath, unclenched my jaw like I wasn't about to fight someone, and suddenly my body went from "we're dying" to "it's okay, you got this, you can do this." The next step is to train your mind, especially the amygdala. And trust me, your amygdala is like that one dramatic friend who thinks every little thing is a full blown tragedy. Mine panics at the dumbest things. Once I had to call someone I did not know. I was literally staring at my phone like it was some sort of ticking time bomb. My brain went like, what if they don't pick up? What if I sound weird? What then? But every time I forced myself to do these tiny scary things, my amygdala learned, oh, nothing actually went wrong. And maybe I should stop screaming. And that's how you beat hijacks. You train your brain to do tiny scary things until it realizes that it does not need to jump out of your skull. The question now isn't, do I feel fear? The question is, where does this fear belong? In the real fear box or the imagined fear box? Because when you put fear in the right box, you put yourself there too. We've crossed many boundaries. We've crossed the land, the sea, the sky. But the next great frontier is within. The last border that we must cross is within ourselves. Thank you.
Up next, Dhyan Thakur takes us into the space between aspiration and reality, and how we navigate the gap between the two about who we want to be and who we are. Please put your hands together for Dhyan Thakur.
I don't know, to be honest. And yes, I'm pretty sure we've all felt that sense of ambiguity after waking up from something so tangible, vivid, and unanswerable. Dreams. It might have been about saving the city from supervillains, or flying to school, or holding the hand of a loved one. We want to dream forever, either because we want to hold on to our memories, or because we are simply not content with what we actually possess. But what exactly are these odd movies that we see in our day-to-day lives? Well, Sigmund Freud stated in his psychoanalytic theory that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. They represent disguised fulfillments of repressed wishes, either sexual or aggressive in nature. I, personally, cannot best the father of psychology, of course, but I believe that dreams are the evidence of the human ambition and the will to create, innovate, change, and maybe destroy. All innovation, all creation, whether it be Alfred Nobel pioneering the first dynamite, or Stan Lee sketching out the first drawing of Iron Man before the concept ever existed, it all begins with a wandering mind. And yes, I am talking about a time where Stan Lee didn't mean an oddly shaped bottle. Dreams show us how powerful we could be if we ever stopped placing limitations on ourselves. And what exactly aren't dreams? Well, let me make the distinction clear. Dreams are not prophecies. They aren't any of that pseudoscience stuff. And I tell you with full confidence because otherwise I would be 6 foot tall, which I am not. But what dreams actually are your thoughts, visualized. And with your visualization, you can create wonders like this or this. And that's the thing with dreams. They do not care about barriers or whether or not skies are supposed to warp like that or clocks if they're supposed to melt. No. They are the one place where absurdity feels inevitable, where malarkey becomes magnificent, and where your subconscious finally gets to clock in for its night shift. Though, before you sleep, let me snag you from your sleep. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a talk to give. Dreams, the way they occur, and the dreams that we actually have, happen in a very real manner, very practical manner, almost annoyingly so. Dreams, for all their splendor, aren't whimsical movies created by a brain too soaked in boredom. No, they're biological events. They're complex, they're structured, and most importantly, they're purposeful. So, what am I getting at here? When we enter REM sleep, the phase most associated with dreaming, especially vivid dreaming, our brain activates a network which is involved in emotional regulation, in memory consolidation, in prediction modeling. And a translation for all those who don't want to get to learn from such technical terms, while you think you've become a cockroach and are late for work, and yes, it is a basis for a book, your brain is actually filing papers like a corporate slave. It's asking you, what did we learn today? What should we keep? And what error should we avoid making tomorrow? Freud gave a really good explanation, but it was one part of the entire story. Wish fulfillment, dreams as portals to the unconscious, coded messages. And if we only rely on Freud, we risk treating dreams like riddles rather than reason. So let's sharpen the lens a bit. Modern neuroscience suggests that dreams are the testing grounds of the human mind. As described by Auntie Ravenswo's threat simulation theory and related works on a world simulator, it's a mental sandbox where your brain gets to experiment without any consequence. Kind of like a game called Minecraft. And yes, this is actually one place where your imagination is actually the only restraint. In that sense, dreams are the safest laboratory ever invented. Because in real life, if you mess up, you get punished. But in dreams, you just wake up and restart again. It is an evolutionary shaped simulator where I can practice facing the fear of cats. And maybe that is the provocative idea. Maybe dreams aren't who we are. They're prototypes of who we could become. And this is exactly where breaking the barrier of your own mind begins. Because inside a dream, you aren't restricted by fear, practicality, or what will people say. Inside a dream, you are in control. You do what you feel like doing. And now, before you accuse me of pumping delusion into your veins like pre-workout, let me make the distinction clear. Dreams are not goals. They aren't your perfect self. They are raw materials to achieve that. They are the first blueprint for ambition, where we finally admit what we want before life talks us out of it. Not in the Freudian way of you secretly want to marry a giraffe or you want to throw a chair at someone who disagrees with you. No, please, for everyone's safety. But in the sense that dreams surface the very questions we try our hardest to outrun. Are you satisfied with who you're becoming? In that process, are you afraid of failing? Or worse, are you afraid of succeeding? Dreams never answer these questions. They ask them loudly, strangely, oftentimes when you're eating cereal out of the sky. And you don't need to be a philosopher or a scientist to get it. Everyone dreams. Whether it is the child who is studying for his exams and wants to go to sleep because, am I right, who wants to study math at night? Or it's the parents who are juggling their bills and want to go on a vacation. Or the corporate slave who has been in his line of work for so many years without any opportunity of success. Everyone, they might have a different background, they might be at a different age, but everyone will dream. And so if life is the performance and our dreams are the brain's rehearsal room, the problem isn't that we dream too absurd. The problem is that sometimes our lives are too compact to fit what we're actually capable of. And so the next time that you wake up breathless, sweating with a strange sense of why, Can't life feel like that? Don't dismiss it. And maybe, just maybe, that is why we chase dreams. Not because we want to escape or rewrite reality, because we want to expand it, to create something, to change something, to destroy something. What is that something? Dreams will not give you the answers. A very good morning. Thank you so much.
Next up is Haley, who dives into the invisible mental shortcuts that shape how we think, judge, and decide. Her talk unpacks cognitive biases and how they quietly influence our everyday choices. Please put your hands together for Haley Dave.
All right, picture this. Someone leaves you on red for 8 minutes and instantly your brain goes, wow, that's it. They hate me. You should think of changing schools. Or it's better if you move to a whole new continent. Or you go to a shop and instead of pulling the door, you push it. And you're like, excellent. Everyone just saw that. That is the biggest downfall ever. How many of you think that your brains are extremely dramatic just like that? Yeah, me too. But relax, no one even noticed. They were too busy overthinking their own existence. And that is exactly why today we're talking about confirmation biases, the brain's favorite glitch. Now, before I start, I want you to look at this number. Seems huge, right? But studies from UCSD show that an average individual makes about these many decisions every single day. Yes, 35,000. So by the time you decide what outfit to wear, whether to check your socials, and then whether to decide if your head is in the perfect angle of existence, you've probably made around 400. And that's just the start of your day. And because your brain cannot process all of this information consciously, it uses the help of mental shortcuts, which are known as heuristics. Now, heuristics can be useful. They can be a little dramatic and sometimes a little dangerous. All right, moving on, I want you to pick either one of the two words that are going to be displayed on the screen and listen to this audio really carefully. Now, I want you to pick the other word and listen to the same audio again. Some of you only heard the word brainstorm in both the cases, while some of you swear that the only word you heard was green needle and some of you switched between the two. But does that mean that the audio changed? No, it didn't. Your expectation of it did. And that is exactly what happens in real life. Your brain tries to fill in the blanks with information that it already believes in, and that is exactly how confirmation biases sneak in. The brain hates uncertainty. So the moment it forms a theory, it starts searching for proof to support that theory. And you know what's worse? All of this becomes worse thanks to negativity bias, which states that the brain tends to think about negative possibilities more rather than positive ones. So it's like your brain's way of telling you, better safe than socially embarrassed. So let's take an example. You're in the middle of a meeting and you have that one awkward pause. And you're like, oh my God, everyone is judging me. And you feel exactly like this picture right here. Studies show that individuals overestimate how much others notice them by almost 200%. This is known as the spotlight effect, which was first discovered by Gilovich, Medwick, and Savitsky. But I like to call this the main character effect.
We live so loudly inside our own heads that we think that everyone else is watching the same movie, when in reality they're not. They're staring at their own chaos. Now, before I move on, let me tell you an embarrassing story about myself. One time, I waved out at a friend enthusiastically across the corridor. I went full arm, full energy, full sincerity. And she looked me right in the eye and walked away. And I was left there standing like, what just happened? Meanwhile, my brain had a whole other story to tell. It created a whole National Geographic documentary out of that minuscule of an interaction. It went, observe a confused teenager in her natural habitat, wondering why her friend is now her sworn enemy. In those 3 minutes, in those 180 seconds, my brain formulated a whole story as to what I said was wrong and why our friendship was now over. But, like a plot twist that every story has, later when I questioned her about the same, she just said she forgot her glasses at home. My brain didn't need the truth. It just needed a story, and a dramatic one at that. All right. Now, moving on, a study that was conducted by the Cambridge University showed that the brain area that is responsible for taking in contradictory information, once a belief is formed, becomes less active. So in simpler words, when you think you're right, you stop listening. You stop listening to irrelevant information, you stop listening to any other kinds of information that opposes your viewpoint. And that is exactly what happens. And to understand this a little better, let us look at a real case study which was conducted by the Iowa State University. A man was interrogated for 12 hours straight. No food, no sleep, no lawyer, just pressure. By hour 10, the authorities, the investigators, were so convinced that the man was lying that instead of asking him real questions, they started asking him leading questions. Every hesitation was taken as guilt. Every "I don't remember" was taken as a lie. Every sigh taken as a confession waiting to be made. And eventually, the man confessed. The man confessed to a crime that he didn't commit. But this didn't mean that the police were monsters. They truly believed that they were right, and this is the exact damage confirmation biases cause. They lead you to certainty. They make you believe that you're truly right when oftentimes you may not be. And all of this happens because a belief is formed. You see the graph. The spike is the exact moment your brain goes from "I think so" to "I know so." But as your confidence rises, your accuracy certainly does not. And as is indicated by the steep slope, the formation of a belief is a rather instant process. And you know what happens once a belief is formed? It leads to the formation of a bias loop. Now, what exactly is that? A belief is formed, and you start noticing things that support that belief. You start interpreting those things, and then you ignore everything else, which strengthens your original belief, and this loop keeps on becoming tighter and tighter and tighter until you won't budge from your opinion, no matter what anyone says about it. So, the next time you think that someone hates you because they didn't reply to your message in a few minutes, or you pull a door instead of pushing it, and you think everyone just saw that, and so that's the biggest downfall ever. I want you to take a breath. And I want you to ask yourself this. Is this real, or is this just what my brain wants me to confirm? Now, of course, confirmation biases cannot be eliminated. That is just impossible. But you can slow them down, you can challenge them. Yeah, maybe your brain can get the right to write the first version of the story, but you can write the final draft. Which is good, because if I believed every dramatic assumption that my brain made, might have blocked 36 people, dropped out of school twice, and maybe, no, let's be real, probably moved to the mountains to find myself. So yeah, you are the main characters of your life. Just maybe don't let your brain direct the whole show unsupervised. And that more than anything is how you live beyond boundaries. Thank you.
Our next speaker is someone who challenges the world, not with noise, but with clarity. Sana believes that feminism isn't a battle cry, it's a bridge to equality, dignity, and the freedom for every individual to choose the life they want. Please join me in welcoming Sana Abhichandani.
A very good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm genuinely excited to share something with you guys today. But before we begin, I have to warn you. The subject that we are going to talk about today is something that might catch you a little off guard. We are going to talk about the F word. Feminism. Let's be honest. Let's start with a little bit of history. In the 1940s, a now famous poster with the slogan, "We can do it," depicted a young woman in a factory uniform flexing her arm. This particular poster rallied millions of women to join the workforce during the World War II. With so many men away at war, women worked in factory lines, built businesses. Basically, they went beyond the boundaries of what society thought women could do. Imagine being a young woman in 1943, nervously tying up your polka dot bandana as you go out to work for the first time. Things changed when the war ended. People expected women to go back to normal, back to their domestic lives. But the spark had been lit. They had tasted independence. That spark was feminism. Fast forward to today. How is that the very word that helped those women rise beyond those boundaries becomes such a misunderstood word today? Let's be honest, when I say the word feminists, some of us think about angry, man-hating, bra-burning women. A survey shows that 1 in 3 men believe that feminism does more harm than good. Many women too shy away from the label of being called a feminist. I've heard people say, "I'm not a feminist, but I believe in equality," which makes me chuckle because that is exactly what it means. I'm curious, if I ask this audience right now, how many of you would proudly say you're feminists? Some of us might hesitate to raise our hands, some of us might shy away. But yet, if I asked, how many here believe in equality? I suspect almost every hand would go up. Strange, isn't it? Because that is exactly what it means. A Pew Research study shows that 69% of non-feminists believe in gender equality. So the majority of non-feminists actually believe in the core principles of feminism. Clearly, there's a gap between what feminism actually means and what people think it means. So how did we get here? Part of the problem is branding the word feminist as something that comes with a lot of baggage. 45% women in US believe that the word is too polarizing. 30% even believe that it sounds outdated. Decades of misconceptions have compiled together and built a myth of feminism. So the question arises, what does feminism actually mean then? Oxford defines it as the advocacy of the equality of the sexes. Merriam-Webster calls it the belief in the advocacy of social, economic, and political equality of the sexes. You see how the keyword here is equality. Nothing more, nothing less. As mentioned before, many shy away from the label. An American study shows that only 29% of women believe that they were feminists. But when the same set of women were told the real meaning of feminism, suddenly 61% of those women believed that the definition described them. So why do so many people shy away from the label? Part of the problem is, yes, because of the baggage, the negative stereotypes. But another issue that I would like to raise today is that people believe that we do not need feminism anymore. I've heard people say, Women can vote, women can work. Equality is basically achieved. What are feminists so angry about now? To an extent, I agree. We have come a long way from the times of the suffrages. But a World Economic Forum 2023 study shows that it would take us 131 years to reach gender equality. 131 years. At this rate, none of us would live to see that day. So yes, we do need feminism, perhaps now as much as ever. Now let's take a breather and return back to basics. What is feminism? In the most basic sense, it's about equality. It's about fairness. If you believe nobody should be held back because they were born in a particular gender, then congratulations, you believe in the core ideas of feminism. Now, let's shift gears and look into the mirror for a bit. Some of us call ourselves feminists, but do our actions really match our words? In the age of social media, it is easy to fall into the trap of tokenism. Liking a hashtag girl power post, reposting a Malala quote on your story, retweeting a trending feminist hashtag. Boom, you've showed the world that you care. My generation, that is Gen Z, is known as one of the most socially conscious generations. They have spread awareness about many important issues, including this one. But a NAACP study shows that too often activism actually lacks real-life follow-up. So in the most basic sense, liking a post is not equal to actually making a change. Let me explain this with an example. I have a friend, let's call him Raj. Raj is one of those typical green flag guys. He believes in gender equality, he's a feminist. But this one instance, I visited his house and noticed that his mother and sister did all the unpaid domestic work while he sat on the couch and chilled. In the online world, he's a woke feminist, but in the real world, he's another one of those guys who lets all the women in his house do all the unpaid domestic work. So what does it look like to practice real feminism? It can come from the simplest of actions, dividing household chores equally, respecting your partner's ambitions as equal as your own. It can also come from the bigger actions. It can come from voting for a candidate that believes in gender equality, advocating for gender equality. If you're a parent, it can simply mean that you raise your sons and daughters with the equality. So, finally, I would like to tackle another issue. Feminism is for everybody. I've heard people say, feminism is a women's issue, so why do men need to get involved at all? Here's when the theme of going beyond boundaries takes a full circle. It's not just for women, it's also for men and non-binary folks. The monster that feminism is trying to fight, that is patriarchy, doesn't only limit women, it also limits men. When feminism says that women should be able to lead without guilt, it also says that men should be able to express, to nurture without the guilt. You know, when I started preparing for this talk, my mind kept circling back to those women in the 1940s. They didn't break the boundaries to change history. They simply did it because the moment required them to. And that is exactly what I want you to take away from this talk. Not a lecture, not a debate, but a simple idea that to make change, sometimes it doesn't start with rallies. It starts with the simplest of tasks, promoting equality, questioning norms. By doing so, we're already moving ahead of a society of what we had been handed down. Thank you for listening.
The final speaker of the event, Kiana Vasa, examines the world we're all living in, one shaped heavily by material pursuits and consumerism. She invites us to reflect on what capitalism gives us and what it silently takes away. Let's welcome Kiana Vasa.
Life is a video game. And sometimes I feel like I am living in a video game because everyone around me keeps on acting like an NPC. You know, those people that are just there and they have no purpose. And even I feel like that because life has no rules, no instructions on how to play, just one thing. Just keep chasing. That reminds me of a story. Once Arav spotted his co-worker Ria talking about weekend trip plans. Curious and slightly disapproving, he approached her and asked, "Why aren't you working for that promotion? If you work a couple of hours, you might finally get it." "Well, why would it be worth giving up my weekend trip for?" she asks. "If you get that promotion, you'll get more money, you'll get that lifestyle that you wanted, you can buy a new house." And Ria says, "And then you can go on that weekend trip that you want and enjoy your life." Ria took a pause. She looked at him and said, "I really like my home. I love the lifestyle that I'm living right now. And about going on weekend trips and enjoying life, what do you think I was going to do anyways?" Ask yourselves, when was the last time you felt satisfied? Not by what you earned or achieved or bought, but genuinely felt happy in the moment. The thing is, the story stayed with me because society tells us that we should glorify hustle, the people that work 12 hours a day and who miss family gatherings for meetings. They tell us to suppress emotions, that to succeed, you must think and not feel. Which is curious because every dream begins with an emotion. The want to feel happy, to feel belonged, and sometimes even make other people happy. So why is it that we are told to suppress the very thing that we want? And between meetings and milestones, we forget to ask an important question. The question being, what is it that we are really chasing? What is it that you really want? No, it's not that Hogwarts letter. Money. That's what most people would say. But money is just a social construct, something we built to make trading easier. And along the way, we started dividing humans and not companies into assets and liabilities. This all happened because of a systemic update. Industrialization. In the late 18th century came Industrial Revolution, where we started moving from meaning to machinery and started mass producing things. Then work became your value and your weakness was rest. It promised progress and it delivered. But along with process came alienation. According to Gallup 2024 data, only 14% of Indians are actually satisfied in their lives, while 86% are dissatisfied. So the question is, in one of the world's fastest moving economies, why is it that we are dissatisfied and discontent? For that, I'll take you on a trip to an island called conformity. The society built this island, and you know the type of people that live here? Those people that buy a new phone and suddenly their whole life upgrades to iOS 18. Look at me, I have dynamic island. I am cool. No, you're not. The only thing dynamic in your life is your EMI. But moving on. Here in this island, you'll find a monster, a happiness-sucking dementor. And this dementor is called materialism. Materialism tells you, you are what you buy, you are what you earn, and you are your purchasing power. And it has a superpower. Not only does it push you to purchase, but it links objects to feelings. And that superpower is advertisements. Now, advertisements emotionally and cognitively condition you to believe that buying something will generate positive feelings. And And they do it through, let me give you an example. A person feels worthless, unhappy, and dissatisfied in their lives. And suddenly they buy an object. And now everybody loves them. They are happy. It's like, are you unhappy? Here's happiness. It's just ₹99 and on sale for Diwali. We see about 6,000 to 10,000 ads per day. And according to Harvard Business Review, about 70% of them have some type of emotional triggers, which pushes you to buy these objects. Suddenly, you're not chasing experiences, you're chasing items. Now, last year I conducted a survey with 100 people, and I tried to find a correlation between materialism and the amount of time you spent on social media. The results suggest the more time you spent on the media, the more desire you would have to purchase these items. That tells us about how much of a hold materialism has on us. I would like to settle a debate once and for all, a cliche debate that we've all heard. And the thing is, here's when people tell me, happiness does not last. Why would I chase happiness? And I say, exactly. The initial chemical reaction for any emotion is about 90 seconds. It might last a day or two if it's impactful enough, but every emotion fades. Sadness, grief, confusion also don't last. It's like an ecosystem. Where there is rain, there is rainbows, snow, and hail. So the debate is, does money buy happiness? And the answer is, yes. Yes, it does. It buys that initial chemical reaction of 90 seconds, that dopamine hit when you finally get something that you really wanted, that not lasting feeling. A Ferrari will not silence an anxious mind, but it will silence your bank accounts. When you look beyond the boundaries, you realize that the question isn't if money buys happiness, but it is if money buys satisfaction, if money can make you feel contentment. So let's play this game again. And this time, maybe not try to change the game, but change how we play it. Not chase the next level, but try to experience the moment. Let's press play again. But this time, play differently. Thank you.
Before I hand over the mic to Neha ma'am, a small debrief. Some of you will be sent a mail requesting your feedback for the event. I request all of you who receive it to please respond to it. It only contains a question which has to be answered on a scale from 1 to 10. Please take out over half a minute and respond to this promptly once you get the mail. Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of tonight. May I please request all the speakers to come on stage. You can get up right now or afterwards. Okay, so that's my father who's saying that they deserve a standing ovation, so maybe we should listen to him. Thank you so much. If you can just give us 2 more minutes and be seated. So today I don't think was just about the series of speeches, but it was actually about a collection of perspectives. These 12 young speakers stood before us and offered us new ways of looking at the world. They questioned free will, challenged stereotypes, decoded the brain, and explored sound, silence, and everything else in between. Safe to say that they have given us a lot to think about. I would also like to call on stage our volunteers, Ishan and Krish. Please join us. And the core team, Rachit, Harshil, Tushti, and Suhani. This has largely been a student-led event, and the core team has been working for more than 3 months to bring this to life. The core team has been involved in nearly every aspect of this event, from submitting the proposal for the license, to conducting auditions, to selecting the final speaker cohort, coordinating logistics, and ensuring that every piece of technology worked exactly when it needed to. We'd also like to take a moment to thank Parul ma'am and Luna ma'am, who have guided and supported and mentored our speakers. As well as always, of course, the tech team, the sound team, and the art department. Congratulations, guys. You've done a wonderful job. Thank you so much. If there's one thing, if there's one message to take home today, let it be this. Ideas don't change the world by being spoken. They change the world by being heard. And today, you listened. Thank you so much for being present, and thank you for believing in the power of ideas worth spreading. Please rise for the national anthem. Assembly, Savdhan.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय है
भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा
द्राविड उत्कल बंगा
विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा
उज्जल जलधि तरंगा
तब शुभ नामे जागे
तब शुभ आशीष मागे
गाए तब जय गाथा
जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे
भारत भाग्य विधाता
जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Assembly, Vishram. Thank you all for being here and wish you all a very good night. All of us will just wait and we'll gather around the TED logo for a group photograph. So go ahead, assemble yourselves there. Pradeep sir, Rajesh sir. Parul ma'am, want to come join us please if you're still here?